Diablo 4 wants to make sure that you know it will not be on Game Pass, and I found this to be very interesting. Rod Ferguson took to Twitter to announce this. He kind of couched it with some good news, but also wanting to let people know, listen, we're getting a ton of questions about this. It's not going to be on Game Pass. I want to look at his tweet and what he said exactly, but I also want to look at a few other things that I think should be considered here. Number one, there were comments from Phil Spencer made in September that specifically mentioned Diablo. I also want to look at what Lulu Chang has been saying as she continually pushes for this deal as somebody who works at Blizzard Activision. And then, what about Activision's history with Game Pass? We discovered some things from the CMA and some of the documents that I do think is playing a role here, but it's interesting in light of the debates and the discussions about whether or not this deal should go through to have one of the largest titles of the year underneath Activision Blizzard have to come out and say, listen, we're not going to be on Game Pass. So let's just look at the tweet, okay? And I'm going to do this every once in a while. I'm just going to show you the live stream, sort of the live puppy cam of the Wolfpack, just to keep everybody calm and just keep everybody chill, because I know people are going to think I'm being critical here. So look at the puppy and just stay calm. So Rod Ferguson said the following: "It's awesome seeing the excitement around the Diablo 4 beta and our Wolfpack puppy." There it is. There's the Wolfpack puppy. "We've been getting some questions about Diablo 4 on Game Pass, and I want to let you know we have no plans for that. See you in Sanctuary during the beta early access weekend starting March 17th. And so they were apparently getting so many questions about this, he had to take to Twitter to say, we're not doing that, okay? We have no plans for that. Now, he's obviously using that classic line of like, listen, we have no plans for that, because if by some miracle the Xbox Activision deal goes through very quickly and then they suddenly own Diablo, according to Phil Spencer, I think the plan is to put a game like Diablo on Game Pass, which really is a head scratcher. If it's such a great deal and it's so good, why wouldn't Activision Blizzard be doing it now? Which, that's the question that I have for Lulu Chang. Lulu Chang is the EVP of Corporate Affairs and the CCO of Activision Blizzard. She's been tweeting quite a bit, rather critically of Sony about, listen, this deal should go through. This is a great deal. We're offering them great deals on Call of Duty. Well, if it's such a great deal and it's going to be so good for consumers, I guess I'm curious why Activision Blizzard isn't taking full advantage of Game Pass right now. Maybe Xbox can't write in a big enough check. Maybe Microsoft is super worried that, hey, listen, we're not going to be able to afford that exclusivity if the deal doesn't go through. Or if the deal goes through, we don't have to write you a check, right? There's a lot of moving parts here. I know what most people are going to say. Why would they put it on there if they're going to have to basically pay Activision Blizzard for it to be on Game Pass? If the deal goes through, they don't have to do that. Well, again, the question would be for Activision Blizzard. You have people that work for the company walking out to the public right now acting like this is going to be a great deal. Or, let's get these things together. Why are you not actively pursuing being on Game Pass right now if it's such a great deal? If it's going to be so good for the consumers. Look at the puppy. Don't get mad at me. I'm just asking questions, right? Everybody stay calm. I am curious why you wouldn't be preemptively working for that. Wouldn't you have a conditional clause in the contract? Listen, we're going to put Diablo 4 on Game Pass. This is how it's going to work. In light of the acquisition, if that goes through, then you gave money to Activision Blizzard, and then those funds would essentially be yours now, I guess? I don't know. One of the central pieces of the deal is getting Activision Blizzard so they can put their games on Game Pass. Phil Spencer said so in September of 2022. Look at the puppy. Everybody stay calm. In an official blog post, Phil Spencer said the following: "We intend to make Activision Blizzard's much-loved library of games, including Overwatch, Diablo, and Call of Duty, available in Game Pass and to grow those gaming communities." So I know people are going to say maybe he just means the existing games. It's their existing library. So Diablo 3 and all the Call of Duties and all of Overwatch. Okay, well, I don't think that's the only thought here. He recently did an interview with Xbox On, and he said in that interview, I went and rewatched it to make sure I was sure about this. He doesn't mention Diablo, but he does say they want to bring Blizzard Activision titles, their big mainline titles, to Game Pass. But I don't think anybody was sort of wrong for thinking that when he said Diablo in September and then recently did that interview, that's why so many people were asking Rod Ferguson, hey man, are we going to get Diablo on Game Pass? Did you guys already work out a deal? And he says no, obviously, because they want to sell games. Now, if you wonder why Activision might avoid Game Pass, you don't have to wonder. They've told us in a CMA report. This came out. I covered this just recently because we were basically talking about the way forward for Game Pass. I'll touch on that in a moment because I do think that's related to this. According to a report from the UK's Competition and Market Authority, the CMA, Activision Blizzard has avoided launching games on Xbox Game Pass because the company believes that doing so would cannibalize buy-to-play sales. Look at the puppy. Don't get mad at me. That's just the facts, Jack. That's just from the official documents and the reports. So we know why Diablo 4 isn't going to be on Game Pass, because it's terrible for sales. It won't be what Blizzard wants from the deal. Now, this puts, I think, the Xbox Activision deal in a very new light. Well, we have these big properties, these big companies we want to work with, and they're actively avoiding us. Like, clearly Microsoft was seeking out Activision Blizzard titles to be on Game Pass if there's a narrative that, no, we avoided Game Pass. It would cannibalize our buy-to-play sales. Now, this is corroborated by Microsoft's own reports to the CMA that Game Pass has had a cannibalistic effect on sales. I'm not trying to rip that out of context, as people keep saying I'm ripping it out of context. Of course, when you increase a subscription funnel up to 25 million plus people with the selling point of day and date on Game Pass, of course your sales went down. That's not like a slam or a criticism. That's the natural result of fostering an ecosystem of subscription over individual purchase. That's literally the value point. That's the selling point of Game Pass. Okay, like, nobody's saying anything controversial here. The question is, if this Activision deal is going to be so great and Microsoft's going to start putting these really big titles on Game Pass, where's the money going to come from? Blizzard Activision right now is basically saying, we don't want to be there. It'll hurt buy-to-play sales. Our biggest title this year, it's going to be one of the biggest games of 2023. Commercially, I think Diablo 4 will be in second place. Hogwarts Legacy is not even on the old-gen consoles and Switch yet. It's likely going to be unbeatable, but Diablo 4 could potentially rival it. This is the first time in Diablo history that it's launching both simultaneously on PC and console. That could be significant, especially considering it is able to run on very weak PCs. That's great for the PC marketplace, and it's going to be on the PS4 and the Xbox One. So that's going to enable their footprint to be absolutely massive. And when you see a company actively saying, that's not in our best interests, well, what does that mean once the property's owned by Microsoft? Nothing's really changed. It's not like the property is suddenly going to generate money by sheer magic. And the funny thing is, Diablo 4 is probably a pretty good fit for Game Pass. It's an ongoing live service game. There's going to be ongoing monetization. There's going to be expansions. It's a great game to just fill the funnel with. Just put it on Game Pass and let people jump in and not have to go through that payment hurdle. But again, Activision Blizzard says, no, we don't want to do that. So I continue to look at this and ask that question, where is the money going to come from? We saw this with Netflix. I call it the Netflix Season 2 effect. Netflix would throw a ton of money at a brand new show, and it would look awesome, and it would be awesome, and everybody would subscribe to Netflix to watch this awesome show. And then Season 2 would not have a tectonic effect on sub numbers because people have already seen the show. They just sort of stay subscribed, and then they watch it. And then they would cancel the show because it wouldn't move the needle enough. That would be the concern here. If you have economic realities motivating large companies like Activision Blizzard to avoid Game Pass, Microsoft can't wave a magic wand over Diablo 4 and suddenly make it way more commercially viable in their ecosystem by putting it on Game Pass, which could happen. He left it open. Rod Ferguson left it open because if you think about it, the final deadline for one of the regulators is like late April. So, let's say the thing somehow skates through and clears in May. Well, Diablo 4 is launching in June. That could be enough time for all the ink on all the contracts to dry to suddenly shove Diablo 4 on Game Pass, which would be a little bit of a nightmare because you've procured a lot of pre-orders so people could get into the beta, and getting that pre-order money now and then having to refund it would be a bit of a nightmare. But I do think that is something that we should all be considering. Long term, if they get the Activision Blizzard deal to go through, what's the difference? What's the change? Activision Blizzard's looking at the entire console market right now in PC, and they're saying, even though Xbox is the smaller share of the market, we still don't want the game on Game Pass. We want to make as much money as possible. That could be related to their own budgets and their own line items and how they make ends meet. But when they're suddenly owned by Microsoft, those operating costs don't evaporate. Those production costs don't go away. Where's the money going to come from to fund these projects, to fund these companies, if you suddenly lop off large portions of revenue by taking really big mainline titles and putting them on Game Pass? I have continued to say it's a 900 IQ play. Microsoft can gobble up this giant portion of the market, make Game Pass look way better. One of the main problems with Game Pass is the cadence of big titles. This would enable them to have a far greater cadence of big titles because they would suddenly own way more titles. And then, while bolstering Game Pass, they can sell the games elsewhere. You're selling the game on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 and PC. Those are markets that are proving themselves to be markets where people buy lots of games. They're ecosystems that are a little bit different in how they function. That's not a slam. That's not me sort of saying one side's better than the other. But if you look at the revenue reports for Activision, like 13% of their annual revenue came from Sony. That's a lot of money that then would suddenly be going to Microsoft. That's what makes this plan so brilliant. Even though I'm against it, I can respect the business savviness of it and the 900 IQ play, as I call it, because you're suddenly not just bolstering your own brand, you're funneling lots of cash flow in. I continue to wonder if this is such a great deal, if it's supposed to go through, and Lulu Chang thinks it's great, likely because she's going to get a big fat payout if it goes through. I don't think she's concerned with the ecosystem or the games or the gamers. But that's my question. If this is such a great deal, and Game Pass and all these titles with Blizzard Activision, it's going to be better for the gamers, why aren't you doing it now? Well, Blizzard Activision will tell you. You just got to read the reports. As always, if you like this video, please hit subscribe and the bell button, and I'll see you in the next one.